We're going to be talking a little bit about what's going on the first 6 months of 2019. We always look at the end of the year, but it's been a kind of a quiet summer around here. We've had some time to kind of recharge. I started poking around in the end of June numbers and wanted to kind of give you guys an update of what I'm seeing in terms of the trends of vehicle sales and look into a few other things. So we're going to see if we can get this part going too, get the slides up for you. All right, so first thing, mid-2019 transportation trends. I always look at Ward's auto data for vehicle sales, focusing primarily on what types of vehicles, what powertrains are being sold, gives us really good indication where things are going. If you are a frequent reader of my blogs, we'll get into that in a second. Again, I always put up our board of advisors. It's grown a little bit. We added about 5 new companies just 2 months ago. So we're getting much more diverse, great input from so many different sectors of the market. The biggest thing about this slide is that bottom disclaimer. Everything you hear today is me. It is not on behalf of anyone on the board or any contributor to the Fuels Institute. It is 100% me. So if you agree with what I'm saying, great. If you disagree with what I'm saying, don't hold these guys accountable. It's all on my shoulders. So if you've been reading the blog, you know that about 1.5 years ago, I started kind of getting a little, I needed to entertain myself. So I started using musical references. In the latest blog, I used Def Leppard from 1983, Photograph. Thought it was important because it's kind of like, if you want to see where the market's heading, you need to understand where we are today. We need to understand how we got there, but take a look at what's going on today and what are the parameters. Take a picture of today, take a photograph, and really figure out how things are going. So we're going to start off with some data, just kind of put the market in perspective. So as we're looking at sales numbers and trend indicators, what is it really going into? What are we trying to understand about the market as a whole? Biggest thing is there are more than 260 million light-duty vehicles registered in the United States in 2017. That number's gone up for 2018, obviously. You can take a look at the trend. We were below 250 in 2013. 260 million vehicles is a lot of vehicles. And we start thinking about how fast can that complexion of the market change. We have to be thinking about what are we introducing to the market and how long would it take it to effect a market transition. We've been selling between 16.5 and 17.5 million new vehicles a year for the last 5 years. That's only about 6.5% of the entire population of vehicles. So when you're thinking about, we have great increase in sales of any type of technology, it's going into 260 million vehicles. And one of the things that we need to pay attention to is on this chart here, you see the statistical average estimated by Ward's for 2019 is a drop of 600,000 units over 2018. And all the reports I've been reading recently that the softening of the new vehicle market, that has a major impact. If we start seeing fewer vehicles sold, new vehicles, new technologies, new efficiency achievements, that's going to slow the rate of transition in the market. So the more new vehicles brought to the market on a regular basis, the more quickly the market can transition to something new. But if we're seeing a decline in sales, that's going to slow down the transition to something new. So that takes us to this chart. And if you've been around for a while, you've probably seen this chart numerous times. You're probably sick and tired of me talking about it. But it is so important to understand how long it takes for this market to transition. We take a look at this. And what I did here is I assumed something new. Pick any type of new technology. Introduce January 1, 2018 to every single vehicle sold. 100% instantaneous market conversion for all new vehicles. And every vehicle from that point forward is equipped with that technology. Based upon EIA's forecast for vehicle sales and fleet size and turnover, it's going to take at least 9 years before that new technology is in 50% of the vehicles on the road. That's assuming the sales of vehicles stay at a 16 plus million unit sold a year. That is a long time if you're talking about 100% immediate conversion. So put that in terms of electric vehicles. If the federal government came out and said January 1, every vehicle sold has to be electric, and we still sold 16 million, it's going to take 9 years before they're 50% market share. So where are we in the conversion to something new than what we've been doing so far? Well, we need to think about the used market. So let me back up a second. The new market is what's going to tell us what's changing and how fast the market can change. But we need to really start thinking a little bit more about the complexion of the used market because it's such a huge factor in what consumers are buying. We sold nearly 41 million used vehicles in 2018. compared to 17.2 million new vehicles, the used car market is absolutely huge. 70% of all vehicles sold last year were pre-owned. So what does that mean? Well, the composition of the used car market is changing. And we're seeing that with the leased vehicles. If we take a look here, in 2018, almost a quarter of all vehicles sold in the used market were 3 years old. All right, that is basically the time when leased vehicles are coming off lease. So this is the breakdown in terms of what types of vehicles are selling, not powertrains, but whether it is a utility vehicle, a car, or a truck. 4.3 million vehicles are expected to come off their lease this year. These are 2016 model year vehicles that were put on a 3-year lease. They're coming back to the lots as trade-ins and being resold as pre-owned vehicles. In 2016, 43% of all leased vehicles were some sort of utility vehicle. 99% of all vehicles sold in 2016 were liquid fueled. So you start thinking about where are people going to buy cars if the new vehicles are becoming more expensive, or if the economy starts to slump, the used vehicle laws can become much more enticing. In addition, probably the biggest factor I see here is that those vehicles coming off lease, they're 3 years old, they're modern, they're well equipped, they have all the creature features we're looking for. It might be a year or two old, but that doesn't matter to most people, and they're $15,000 less than a new competitor. So you have a situation where customers who have been trending towards utility vehicles for the last 10 years are now seeing high quality, low miles, gently used, well-equipped utility vehicles available side by side with a new one for a massive discount. That there could lead a lot into what we may see in terms of a decline in new vehicles sold. And if that happens, then we're going to slow down that transition in the market even slower than we've seen in these charts here. So where are we? The light-duty vehicle market, as I said, evolved slowly. But take a look at the breakdown in powertrains. 2015, 94% of all light-duty vehicles sold were gasoline. Through the first half of 2019, that number has dropped a little bit to 92.4%, but it's only 1.6% change in almost 5 years. That's not a huge change. It's a slow progression. Diesel vehicles have stayed in the 3 to 3.3% market range. But I think the biggest thing we can see here is we've seen between 2018 and the first 6 months of 2019, the percentage of vehicles sold that are electric vehicles, these are plug-in electric, not hybrids, pure battery electric vehicles, has gone from 1.2% to 1.5%. That is not a big number. 1.5% is a very small percentage of the market, but that jump of 0.3% is a big jump. Now, what's interesting is plug-in hybrids have lost market share. They've gone from 0.7 to 0.5, where hybrids have increased a little bit. But we're seeing some diversification in the powertrains from 2015 to 2019, and we're seeing a trend for the electrified powertrains to gain some market share. But when I say some, I'm stressing the term some. That doesn't mean the pace of change and the pace of growth for those vehicles should be ignored. You take a look at where we were 2018 through June, 2019 through June, you see the change in those first 6 months. You see the growth, almost doubling of electric vehicles in the first 6 months. The latter half of 2018 had a strong growth in electric vehicles. But so far this year, the first 6 months have been much stronger than the first 6 months of last year. That trend might continue. We'll see. And if it does, then the overall market share of battery electric vehicles at the end of this year could be much stronger than we've seen in the past. But you see also in the first 6 months a 1.2% drop in gasoline powertrain. But what I want to point out here, and I'll show it in another slide, is the increase in diesel. So we hear a lot about diesel's dead. See what Europe's doing. They're trying to run away from diesel as fast as they can. In the United States, and I'll show why, it has not really suffered. And we're seeing the stabilization light-duty diesel market because they are marketing to their niche customer. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So let's take a look at the plug-in vehicles. This chart shows battery electric and plug-in hybrid vehicle sales through 2018. The jump in sales between 2017 and 2018 was 75% growth. That is an astounding number. Now, keep in mind, we only sold about 200,000 vehicles that were electric, plug-in electric in 2017. So the baseline of what we're selling was pretty small. And I used to joke a lot, if I sell 5 units today, and I sell 10 units tomorrow, it's 100% growth. But a 75% growth is nothing to ignore. It is significant. Even if the denominator in that first number is fairly small, that growth rate is pretty high. So where are they in 2019? Well, we've seen the battery electric vehicles themselves, just pure battery, go up 96% over the first 6 months in 2018. Now, you see the drop in the plug-in hybrid electric vehicles of 27%. So the overall increase in the first 6 months over last year was 38%. That's not the same as 75%, but 38% still a significant jump. Now, we'll see if they can keep pace with a strong second half of 2018 going into the next half of this year. If they do, then I suspect that that 38% number will go up. But that 96% electric vehicle sales, pure electric vehicles, is important to pay attention to. Again, we're still looking at 120,000 units. We're not talking about 1.2 million. So it's a fraction of what would be required to really create a sea change in the market, but it's something we should not ignore. So when we look at the overall market in terms of powertrains, the entire market so far in the first 6 months of 2019 versus 2018 is down almost 2%. The notable changes are, I'm looking at the ones that have grown. Hybrid vehicle sales are up 18%. Electric vehicles, as I mentioned, up 96%. Diesel vehicles are up 6.5%. The big losers are fuel cell vehicles. Again, very small number to start with. So in terms of total units sold and lost, probably not significant. Plug-in hybrid electric vehicles lost significant market share, and gasoline dropped 3% versus last year. So you are seeing some changes in what consumers are buying throughout the first 6 months of this year, which could be an indicator of trends going forward. But again, going back to my song perspective, we have to think about what customers are actually driving, what they want to purchase. And we had a report last year on driving vehicle sales where we looked at 15 years of data on class of vehicles sold, price of vehicles sold, fuel economy. And we need to take a look and see what our customers are actually buying and how does that match up with the direction of fuel efficiency strategies bring into the market and see if customers are actually responding to it. Now, I think it's appropriate. I'm using the cover from a Carr's album. We're not selling as many cars as we used to, so I think there's something telling in that in and of itself. There's a chart from that report. We looked at 2003 to 2017, and I want to point out the cross-utility market. Huge increase, 35% market share by 2017 compared to about 10% in 2003. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that, and we kind of surmise them in the report. You know, they are less expensive than sport utility vehicles, yet have the same carrying capacity for a lot of them. Those drivers don't necessarily need the 4x4 towing capacity power associated with the larger SUVs. They want the ride quality of a mid-size sedan, but they want that more. They want more carrying capacity. They want a higher level to ride on. They want to be able to get better fuel efficiency than an SUV. And so the CUVs come to market with better fuel efficiency than their competing sport utility, ride quality similar to a midsize sedan, fuel economy that's second only to small cars, and a price tag that's a lot less expensive than the competing utility vehicles. So that's a trend we saw through 2017, and it has not changed. Through the first 6 months of this year, CUVs were 39% of vehicles sold in the United States. 30% were cars. So you're looking at a market here where we keep talking about we're addicted to trucks. A lot of the CUVs are classified as light trucks, and that's why we get this misnomer that trucks are dominating. Quite frankly, SUVs, pickups, and vans combined for that's 17.5% and 13%, about 30%, 31%. The rest were cars and CUVs. So we think about that. What does that tell us about the customer, and how can we go to market with more efficient technologies? Consumers want to buy what they want. They want to buy the vehicle that fits their needs, that fits their budget, and has the stylistic qualities they're looking for and the creature comforts they want. But also, they can only buy what's available. When we take a look at the distribution of classic cars by powertrain, we see that it's quite clear why gasoline is dominating. One, that's what we've been selling for the 100 plus years, but we had almost 150 cars offered in gasoline powered engines, more than 100 CUVs offered in gasoline powered engines. Compared to the other powertrains, there's nothing coming close to that type of inventory available for consumers. Now again, we're selling to the customer what the customer wants to buy, what they're comfortable buying, what we know they're going to buy, hence the CUVs and the gasoline. But we're seeing the growth of electric, hybrid, and plug-in hybrids concentrated largely in the car category with a little bit of CUV penetration, but the cars have been dominating since they came in the market. Take a look here again. The market available for these vehicles is dominated by cars. And I believe that until we start seeing these advanced powertrains appear in the vehicles that customers want to buy, the crossover utility vehicle in a growth market, we're going to continue to see the powertrain struggle to gain the volume, maybe not the growth year over year rates that we've seen, but the volume of numbers sold to have a meaningful impact on the complexion of the market. It's going to take some time until they start fitting the niche what the customers want. Now, I point out diesel here, and I'll get into that in a minute as well. The number one category of diesel vehicles sold is pickup trucks. This is an example of an industry finding the powertrain, matching it with the utility needs of the vehicle with the needs and the desires of the customer. More powerful engine in a work vehicle that the drivers most often are using for something that's going to require some strength, whether it be payload capacity, towing capacity, or what have you. That mixture between the diesel engine and the pickup trucks seems to make quite a bit of sense. This is a list of the top 5 models in these 4 alternative categories sold through June 2019. Again, this tells a story too. When we look at diesel vehicles, it is all pickup trucks. In fact, you don't get to a sport utility vehicle until I think the 9th or 10th position in the best sales. The first car, the BMW 5 Series, I think that's 17th in the list of diesel vehicles sold. So it's pretty much all pickup trucks. When you look at electric hybrid and plug-in hybrid, it's almost all exclusively sedans. You have a couple CUVs in there with the RAV4. That's pretty much it. But they're almost all cars. And that's telling us, that's reinforcing the story we see here, is that that's what we're bringing to market. Customers don't want to buy cars as much as they used to. So we need to figure out how to diversify that. Again, they're offered primarily in declining car segment. 84% of electric vehicles sold in the first 6 months of this year were cars. Now, when we get to the light-duty vehicle market, only 30% were cars. So you're seeing a disconnect between what the electric vehicles being offered are and what the customers are actually looking to buy. I mentioned diesel actually presents a model where we see some value, some consistency between the vehicle technology and what the customer wants. The red dots are how many models are sold. And what I want to point out here is in the pickup category. 91% of all diesels sold were pickup trucks. 17% of all pickups sold were diesel. There were 12 diesel pickups offered for sale in the first 6 months of this year. That is a mating of needs with desire and delivering value to the customer. For 6 months of the year, 95% of the light-duty vehicles equipped with diesel were pickup trucks, and most of them are the 1500 variety. And it makes sense. You can get a diesel-powered full-size truck and get 25 to 30 miles per gallon. Plus, you're getting the 7 to 10,000 pounds or more towing capacity, the 5,000 pounds of payload capacity. You're matching up the needs of the customer with the capabilities of the engine. And despite Dieselgate, despite the departure of Volkswagen from the passenger vehicle diesel market, despite the announcement of some other brands that they're not going to be going forward with any light-duty vehicles that are diesel equipped, diesel sales remain steady. The customers who want diesel have not wavered. Now, they are a unique customer. They are 2.5%, 3.5% of the market, and that has not changed. In terms of market share, it's stayed around that 3 to 3.5% range, and we've seen a pretty good trend of sales. Now, the drop in 2016 sales, I believe that was largely because for a while the Ram 1500 diesel was taken off the market by EPA. When it came back on, sales came right back. So you're seeing very consistent performance in the diesel market, and I don't see that changing at all. I think the person who wants a diesel pickup truck, they're not going to be satisfied with something less powerful or less efficient and convenient for what they have. Now that brings us to efficiency gains are a must. Now REMs, end of the world as we know it. A lot of people are saying that, with this efficiency gain, we're going to stop seeing traditional vehicles. We're going to be going full bore into electrification, into autonomous. Everything's going to change overnight. Well, as we've seen, the data doesn't support an overnight change in any respect. Short of a government mandate, the pace of change is going to be relatively steady and slow, going to give the market time to adjust and make accommodations to make sure that we're satisfying the customer's needs as we go forward. But efficiency is not something that can be cast aside. It has to continue to develop and build. Otherwise, we're going to be missing the boat on what consumers want, what the regulators want, really what the economy needs. So let's take a look here using Ward's data again. Every class of vehicle for the first 6 months of 2019 is more efficient than during the first 6 months of 2018. All the new vehicles sold, every single class has shown some sort of improvement. So that's just something to say. Even though we're buying pickup trucks, we're buying SUVs and CUVs, they're still more efficient than the ones they're replacing. And so we're always making that constant progress, no matter what kind of powertrain is being put into it. EPA came out with a report earlier this year showing that carbon emissions per mile and miles per gallon have both gone in the pro-environmental direction since 2004. Now, we've also seen a significant increase in power. That's what the customer's been looking for. The customer says they want to be environmentally conscious, they want low emissions. Of course, we all do, but they also don't want to compromise on performance and power. So as the engine to become more efficient, the automakers have done a good job of balancing. We're going to improve our emissions profile. We're also going to deliver to the customer what the customer has demonstrated and told us they want. They want performance, they want power, they want a capable vehicle. And if it's more efficient and cleaner, fantastic. It's a win across the board. And that's what we've seen in the last 15 years. Again, EPA data. Every single vehicle has become cleaner, whether it be efficiency gains. Even the pickup trucks are 20+% more miles per gallon than they were in 2004. And they're almost 20% lower in CO2 emissions. We're seeing that across the board. There's no argument that the market's not getting more efficient. It is. Is it getting is more efficient as fast as some people want? Maybe not. But we can't dismiss the fact that the market has gotten better. The new vehicles coming on into the market are reducing emissions and giving us more miles per dollar, and that is a win across the board. The data doesn't lie. So we can argue, is it fast enough? Is it not fast enough? But it doesn't really matter at this point. We're making progress. Now get into some of the reasons why. And this is a data set that I thought was fantastic. The transmission in the vehicle makes a lot of sense. I used to ride my bike a lot. I used to ride a couple hundred miles a week. Been a long time since I've done that, but maybe someday I'll get back into it. But the more gears I had on my bike, the easier it was for me to keep going. If I'm climbing a hill and I don't have that granny gear up front, the triplet that allows me to be a complete sissy and spin my legs real fast to keep going, I'm going to fall over. So having more gears helps. And we see here that automatic transmissions have been dominating. Manual transmissions, much to my chagrin, have faded to a niche market. Then that continuously variable transmission has gained market share. So we're seeing automatics and CVTs really have an impact on the market, and those provide a lot more efficiency, just like they do on a bicycle. This chart I love because it's tons of colors, but I want to point out the CVT debuted in 2001, and we didn't start getting 7-speed or more transmissions until about 2004. Now they're in 71% of all new vehicles. And you take a look here, the 4 gears or less is almost gone. 5 gears or less is almost gone, and that's just in the last 10 years. 6 gears, 7, 8, 9, CVT, those are the dominating transmissions. That's improving efficiency. We're bringing more efficient engines to the market. We're also mating them with better transmissions, and we're getting more miles per gallon. Now, there's several other things that have happened. This is all coming from the EPA report. I want to point out a couple highlights. Turbo boosting. We know we're going to 4-cylinder engines for most vehicles. I think the last chart I pulled up a couple presentations ago, like 85% of cars are 4 cylinders now compared to V6s and V8s. Pickup trucks are going that way too, and they're giving the power back by turbo boosting. Boosting was pretty much non-existent until the mid-90s. Now it's on 31% of new vehicles. And according to the Department of Energy forecast that we included in our octane study, they're projecting by, I think, in the next 10 years, 75% of vehicles could be turbo boosted. So huge advancement in that. Gasoline direct injection, much more efficient than what we used to have, debuted in 2008 and 51% of new vehicles. Multi-valve cylinders, 92% of new engines after 30 years. Variable valve timing in just 15, 16 years, 96% of new vehicles. And stop-start, which is that annoying feature when your engine cuts off when you're stopped at a stoplight, and when you take your foot off the brake, it kicks back on. That does save gallons and makes your vehicle more efficient. It's now in 28% of the vehicle market. It's only 6 years old. So what we're seeing is as the manufacturers look at how we're going to crack this nut of efficiency, they have a repertoire of tools available to them, and they're coming to the market pretty quickly. And we're seeing the diversification in engine design. the headlines are only going to say gasoline or electric. That's all you're going to hear. But within that gasoline category, we're seeing all these different things be brought to market to make the engines better, make them cleaner, and make them more efficient. And that's going to continue. I don't see the automakers backing off of efficiency gains in the internal combustion engine because they know as well as we do that it's going to take time for electrification to take over, and electrification is expensive. It's going to get more reasonably priced, but it's still expensive. So what's going on? I'm not going to sing because I only do that privately. Marvin Gaye, a great artist. So what's going on? These are 4 things that I've kind of pulled out. We published our octane study earlier. A lot of discussion for a couple of years about how do we boost the octane and the fuel supply so we can enable more efficient engines. And absolutely, if you can create a high compression engine that doesn't have to tolerate sub-octane fuels, and you can make sure that engine only has access to an appropriate octane level fuel, then you're going to be able to create a much more efficient vehicle. The challenge is how do you convert the whole fuel market to ensure that that vehicle can only buy the high octane product, would never have to tolerate a lower suboptimal octane product without imposing massive costs on the rest of the population who is used to buying regular grade unleaded and now would have to start buying a premium or a premium plus type fuel. It's a big issue. It was a legislative discussion last Congress, but it has kind of gone away so far this year. I haven't heard anything about it at all from Capitol Hill. Not that I'm up there very much anymore, but I haven't heard anything about it. And it seems that the priorities in this Congress are quite different, especially with the new leadership in the House. So I don't see that going anywhere anytime soon, but it is a technology and it is an opportunity and an option that if we can find a way to take advantage of higher octane to enable more efficient engine designs, it would be a great benefit for the market. The question is, how do we do it in a way that benefits everybody across the board and does it in a way that makes sense for the market? The other report we put out there was low carbon fuel standards, and we published that one earlier this year, and that's kind of a case study of the California LCFS, which is the granddaddy of all programs, and it looked at how has the market reacted to the LCFS implementation over the years. And what we found is the California Resources Board continually makes projections as to what they think the technology will be to satisfy the LCFS, what fuel is going to be consumed, and then 2 or 3 years later, they switch their analysis completely and come up with a whole new forecast, and they continue to do that. And it's a challenge because it's impossible to predict how the market's going to react to different programs unless it's a straight out mandate. So they've set targets, they've set objectives. So far, the market's reacted fairly smoothly to it. There's been some bumps, but the mandate to reduce carbon intensity of the fuels has not been real draconian. Starting next year, it becomes much more aggressive, and the ramp up to reducing the carbon impact of fuels in California and other states that are mimicking that program is going to be important. We did this report because we want to better understand how the market reacts, but also because when the United States decided to pull out of the Paris Climate Accords, the news stories started popping up about this locality, this state, this region wanting to consider their own carbon programs. Low carbon fuel standard is one that they've been looking at. In this report, we talk about some Canadian provinces looking to build an LCFS. We know about Oregon and Washington. Some Midwest regional governors are talking about how do we create a regional LCFS. New England states are looking at the same thing. This is a policy that can have massive implications for the fuel supply and for the vehicles that run on that fuel. So it's something to keep an eye on, and this report gives us pretty good baseline upon which to start considering these programs. What's positive about them, what's challenging, and what could be done if they're implemented to be more seamless to the market, more transparent, more predictive for market participants. IMO 2020, it is a incredible experience with this issue. We did a literature review on it because, quite frankly, there's tons of research being done. And when we decided to do this, the board was kind of in between 2 different camps. We had heard reports that this is going to be the biggest catastrophe to the liquid fuels market ever. This is going to be an absolute disaster, massive inflation, $400 barrel oil, all these things. To other reports, this is nothing. This is like Y2K all over again. We're going to wake up the next day, everything's going to be just fine. So we want to do a literature review to find out what it is. And for those of you not familiar with it, basically the International Maritime Organization has dictated that starting January 1, 2020, this sulfur in marine going distillate fuel has to be much, much lower than it is today. And that's putting pressure on the production, the supply, and all those things that go into providing fuel to that market. What this study came out with, analyzing about 35, 40 different studies and analyses, is that yes, IMO implementation is likely going to have an impact on the market. Is it going to be $400 barrel oil, $1.2 trillion impact on the economy? Very unlikely. Maybe 25 to 75 cent per gallon impact on fuel prices, which is a big chunk, but it's nothing compared to what $400 oil would be. And that impact's probably going to be felt over the first 2.5 years. Now, interesting is I saw a Bloomberg article just about a week or so ago, which said, you know what, all the big challenges seem to be kind of resolving themselves. And they're saying that because of the fracking of oil in the United States that has a lower sulfur content, that is making it easier to produce a lower sulfur marine fuel without as much investment, that we're seeing an increase in marine going vessels installing scrubbers. In June 2018, I think there were only 600 vessels with scrubbers, which would allow them to keep using high sulfur fuel. And now there's something like 2,500. So we're seeing that increase. We're seeing the delta between high sulfur and low sulfur fuels on the futures market start to give indications to the market that you can start producing this low sulfur fuel. So Bloomberg's saying, you know, this seems to kind of be taking care of itself. Don't know that that's going to be truly the case. We don't know what the impact's going to be, but this is something we have to pay attention to because the distillate market's a huge market in the world. Now, marine going vessels only consume about 3 or 4% of the distillate fuel in the world, something like that. So, you know, it's a small component, but it has a big punch. Most people believe that the American-based refiners are in a really good position to supply the fuel necessary to satisfy this regulation, but other refiners in other parts of the world may not be so lucky. And then this last one here, the technology report. If you're a member of SAE, you have the opportunity to get to some of their magazines. This is the Automotive Engineering Report. And I point this out because the report says that Delphi Technologies has announced they have developed a compression ignition gasoline engine that's going to improve efficiency by about 50%. Now, this is, a couple years ago, Wards came out and said that Mazda, with a spark control compression ignition, had found the holy grail of internal combustion engine technology. Well, we've been waiting 2 years for Mazda to release that vehicle to the market. It has not happened yet. I've heard it's going to come second half of 2019. Don't know. They call that Skyactiv X, and they're projecting a 30% efficiency gain over their Skyactiv G. We'll see how that plays out. Delphi is saying they're doing compression ignition without a spark and getting 50% efficiency gain. Don't know. We'll see how that type of technology moves in the market if it does. But I point this out because just like the slide where I showed the technologies, the technology to improve internal combustion engine has not been exhausted. There are opportunities, and we're going to continue to see these breakthroughs. And it's important that the ICE continues to become more efficient to satisfy regulations and consumer demands, because it's going to take time for anything other than internal combustion engines to really have a major impact on the market. The other thing we have to think about is fuel prices. Huge impact on the desire of consumers to look at alternative vehicles. So we used to do surveys of consumers, and I found that when gas prices were about $3.70, $3.75, 84% of customers said that they would consider a hybrid vehicle for the next vehicle. When prices dropped down to about $2.50, that number of those interested in buying a hybrid went down by 50%. We saw the same exact thing happen in sales of hybrid vehicles. The pump price is a huge indicator to consumers to start shopping around for something new. Recently, gas prices have been pretty steady. We have not seen massive fluctuations in gasoline retail prices. Diesel prices have been fairly steady too. So we've seen an increase in gasoline this spring, which we always do. In the springtime, we transition to summer burning gasoline. They come kind of in line with diesel a little bit more closely, but then it stabilizes and goes back down at the end of the year. We've seen that since 2000 when I started tracking this. But we haven't seen jumps to 350 and 375. Article in the Wall Street Journal just today was talking about the projection that we're going to have an oversupply of crude oil throughout 2020. Well, if that's true, that's going to drop oil prices. It's going to keep retail fuel prices down. If retail fuel prices are down, the pain to consumers is mitigated, and their interest in trying something new becomes less strong. And so they're not really shopping around for the best price. They're not shopping around for alternatives unless that fuel price goes up. Take a look at oil prices. We saw it drop down in December of last year. There's so many things going on in the world of oil. What's OPEC going to do? What's happening with fracking in the United States? What's going on in other production areas? But I think the number one thing we got to pay attention to, and we heard it from two speakers at Fuels 2019 down in Dallas in May, is we have to look at Iran. And I call this the wild child. So this band, The Untouchables, if you are not familiar with them, I'm not surprised. It's a ska band. If you're not familiar with what ska is, think about music that the only meaning behind it is to make you happy, make you smile. That's ska. If you get a chance, check out The Untouchables. They were a great band in the 80s. But wild child is why I use it, because what Iran does, how the United States and Iran move forward in the tense relationship we have now, what they're doing in the Strait of Hormuz, what they're doing in that area to affect the supply of oil is going to have a massive impact on these numbers right here. And so if there's one region of the world that you should be paying attention to, if you're interested in what's going on in the oil market, you need to be paying attention to what's going on with Iran, because they have the potential to really throw the entire oil market up on its head, have a significant impact on supply availability and price. So wrapping up, I'm going to share with you what we have going on in some upcoming research. We're about to release a study on natural gas refueling infrastructure. Just for those who've been around for a while, we commissioned this to Carnegie Mellon University in 2014. Sponsored research through a university has to be peer-reviewed by a journal, then published by a journal before we can do anything with it. So this is it has some older data in it, but I think the fundamentals about refueling infrastructure based upon different range of vehicles and where you need to position refueling stations for different technologies in different areas of the country, I think it's a very fascinating study and a model that can be extrapolated to other technologies. We are about to go into final review and approval of a paper looking at how you read federal biofuels compatibility regulations, just where you find information on different things and where you need to be looking. We have a draft coming to us on the electric vehicle recharging infrastructure outlook. We have a literature review on the environmental impact of electric vehicles. We are just getting ready to go to peer review on what the impact of fuels market deregulation in Mexico might be on the fuels and vehicles sector. We are analyzing the elasticity demand of biomass-based diesel fuel. That's biodiesel and renewable diesel. We expect to get that draft towards the end of this month, maybe beginning of September. And then we're getting ready to start work on analyzing what the impact of home delivery services will be on miles traveled, fuel demand, alternative vehicles, sales, refueling behavior, and a whole bunch of stuff, and looking at updating our driver demographics report that we published about 3 years ago, looking at how many people are driving, who's driving, where are they driving to, why are they driving, how many people are in the vehicle when they're driving, all those things that go into consumer behavior that leads us directly into understanding what vehicle demand and fuel demand might be in the future. And with that, I will stop and see if there are any questions that I can answer. I think either Amanda or Donovan were monitoring that.
That's correct, John. Just to make sure you can hear me, first of all.
You're breaking up a little bit, Donovan.
Sorry about that. So
there you are.
Currently there are no questions pending, but I just sent a note to all of the attendees. Feel free, as we're waiting here, to send those over via the chat feature at the bottom of your toolbar, or also in the Q&A button. Yes, to answer a few questions, the slides will be available post-presentation this afternoon or later this week. That will be tomorrow. And the video itself will also be available by tomorrow as well. But if you have other questions, feel free to submit those. And if you do not, we definitely won't hold you up for another 20 minutes. We'll get you back to your day, but we'll give you just a few seconds here to gather your thoughts.
And while we're waiting, Don, I'll share that I did a presentation last week on the diesel market, what's going on forecasts for diesel fuel demand, mostly in the freight market, because that's where most of the diesel fuel is consumed, looking at the headwinds for diesel market going forward. I'm going to be writing a blog post on that here in the next week or so that'll go out. So if you have interest in what's going on in the diesel market, check that out, because I think some of the data I pulled was pretty interesting. I think some of the discussion on the headwinds is critical to understanding where the diesel market might go. The headwinds we talked about in that presentation were fuel quality, which leads directly into the Fuels Institute Diesel Fuel Quality Council, which is looking at that specifically, IMO, and a few other things that I think are very important to what's going on in the diesel market. So keep an eye open for that one.
Currently, John, we do not have any questions, but I will post one that is related to the presentation itself. Will you be giving this presentation throughout the rest of this year, or changing it up as we get further in the year as well as into 2020?
I'll be taking parts of this and incorporating into other things. My presentation changes quite a bit. There's a core basis of what I do, but I'm always trying to bring new data to the market. So I think sales through the first half of this year incorporated with longer trend analyses is valuable to do. A lot of the groups I speak to ask for specific focal areas, which we'll incorporate as well. But I think this is fairly representative of the type of material that we try to present on a regular basis. And the whole goal, Donovan, is what we want to do is get people to think beyond their traditional opinions and start thinking a little bit bigger, start thinking in context, put things in perspective, move beyond headline reactionary approaches, and think critically about, okay, this headline says that this company is doing this. What does that really mean? Did they really mean it when they said that? So take the electrification of vehicles, for example. A lot of headlines talking about certain OEMs saying we're going all in on electric. Well, when you start analyzing what does that mean, you start questioning, okay, what do they mean by all in on electric? They're talking about electrified powertrains. So how do you define electrified powertrains? Well, it could be a fully battery electric vehicle, it could be a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, it could be a traditional hybrid vehicle, it could be a stop-start equipped vehicle, depending on how loose they want to be with their definition of electrification. So there's a wide range. And keep in mind, the OEMs have to sell vehicles to their customers. And so they can only sell what the customers want to buy. They can't force the customer to buy a vehicle that they can't afford or that doesn't have the qualities they're looking for. So they need to be flexible, they need to be nimble, but they also need to be responsive to the political pressures to move into a zero emission vehicle market. The other thing to point out on those headlines is there is no statement about when they're going all electric. And I pulled some data from the International Energy Administration that showed the projections on how many vehicles are going to be electric and when they're going to be electric on a time frame by manufacturer is very limited. So it is, there's not a lot of clarity as to, by 2025, and 90% of our vehicles will be electric. They're not saying that. They might be saying by 2025, we're going to have 20 electrified vehicles available. But again, they're not getting into the details on that.
Excellent. Well, John, we do have two questions. The first is this, and I'll just read it directly as it's written here. Are there any comments, or do you have any comments on the California and VW, Ford, Honda, and BMW agreement and its implications?
I haven't read up on that one yet. So I think that's on the fuel efficiency for California. Look, I think the big deal on the fuel economy standards comes into how the federal administration in California resolve their differences. And if they do, then that sets a playing field for the automakers to be able to figure out how to comply and go to market with one vehicle technology across the board. If they don't, then the impacts can be pretty significant. So I think, if the OEMs are able to strike a deal with California and then take that deal and convince the federal EPA that it's something they need to consider, then that's probably what they're going to try to do. But it's going to be a tough road. We'll see what Administrator Wheeler and the president want to do, if they want to work with California or if they don't. I think they've dug their heels in pretty tightly, so we'll see if they budge on that at all.
Thank you, John. Our second question is this. Throughout your presentation, and we may have missed it, but have you correlated VMT with vehicle technology sales, being gas, diesel, and also in electricity, gasoline, and diesel fuel demand? I
haven't done that recently. And EIA does a pretty good job showing BTU consumption, so energy value consumption across different transportation fuel technologies. And looked at that recently, especially with regard to diesel market. I have to look at it again. I think the majority of energy being consumed is liquid, whether it be gallons or it be energy. The technology, and we take a look at the VMT, because they do have the vehicle miles traveled by technology, and that's against estimate. They have forecasts as well, but it is predominantly liquid fuel. You just take a look at the raw numbers, how many vehicles are on the road. It's interesting. We see headlines that we sold 3 million electric vehicles in the world. Okay, you sold 3 million electric vehicles in the world to date. That's over like 10 years compared to 17 million sold in the United States last year and something like 35 million or more sold in China. So you start thinking about the number of vehicles on the market, different technologies. And you can extrapolate that pretty easily to what kind of impact they're having on VMT. The more electric vehicles that come on the market, the more miles they'll travel. That's clear. We know that. But I have to take a look at the EIA numbers, and everybody can look at them. You go to the Energy Information Administration's website and go to their annual energy outlook. It's not just an outlook. It's actually looking back to about 2017. It goes to 2050. But they've got an interactive table viewer that I use liberally that allows you to pull a whole bunch of different data sets, kind of give you a snapshot of where things are. And the one on VMT by power by technology, and then the energy consumption by technology is very helpful for answering this kind of question.
All right, great. Well, that concludes the session in terms of our questions or Q&A session, John. But if you could, just for our listeners, if you had any quick 1 or 2 takeaways from this presentation, what would those be? And we'll wrap up with that.
The market is doing exactly what it's been doing the last 5 years. It is incorporating and absorbing some new technologies in a modest volume. It is showing significant growth in some technologies, but the impact on the market itself is fairly limited because the number of units being sold that are non-traditional fuel technology vehicles is pretty limited. Going into a pool of 260 million vehicles is going to take some time. So I think the number one thing is we're going to see a lot of headlines still. We're going to hear a lot of fanfare, a lot of excitement from advocates of electrified powertrains that the market is exploding. Not literally, but it's exploding with new vehicles. And in one respect, it is. Huge growth, 95% growth in electric vehicle sales over the first 6 months of last year is a significant percentage. The raw numbers, however, is pretty limited. And so I think it's just that constant theme that we've been trying to communicate to the market for the last couple of years is take a deep breath, ask those next questions. Put things in context. And that's one of the things the Fuels Institute has always tried to do. Because of the breadth of our participants, the unique perspectives each one brings, we have a pretty good pool of resources to call on and say, okay, how is this affecting your business? How are you seeing this and what's going on with you? So that we don't find ourselves in an echo chamber and we were able to get outside and talk to others and experience what's going on in the market so that we're more well-rounded. So I think that'd be the number one thing I'd be trying to communicate is that nothing is locked in and nothing is as extreme as it seems when you see it on the news.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate it, John, and we appreciate all of you for joining into this quarter's Fuels Institute distributor-only live webinar. And we look forward to speaking with you next time in the next quarter. And also, if you have any other questions, feel free to look us up at, again, www.fuelsinstitute.org.